All right, everybody, welcome back to Drop Dice. This is Chris, and today it's going to be a random thoughts video. I've got some stuff to kind of share with you guys. So first off, my video that I pre-recorded for the campaign planning session for the Copper Jackals game, for some reason YouTube thinks I've already uploaded the video before, so it's saying it's a copy. And every time I load it into a video editing software, for some reason my video editing software does not like XSplit files, and I can't edit them. So it's ending up where the video is very chunky. I don't know what happened there, but I'll probably do another video where I just kind of walk it through via Google Hangouts, because I seem to have the best luck with Google Hangouts on air. So what this video is about is something different. This is kind of a random thoughts video. Juice posted up a video, and Nerdarchy posted up a video talking about what the social contract is. And this is kind of my thoughts and opinions on the social contract, how I think they can be used, and how I think most people do use them. So there are some points that I kind of disagree with Juice on, and his video is kind of the one that I'm making this more of a response to. I like Juice's videos, and I think that he's the kind of guy that you can have a back and forth conversation with. So this is kind of me starting that conversation with him. So for me, I look at the social contract and the framework as a functioning unit together. A lot of people will say that they don't necessarily do social contracts, and I agree 100% with Juice when he said, you're wrong, you do a social contract, you just may not realize it. So one of the things is like, let's say you've been playing with the same group of guys since high school, and you're now in your 30s. You know what each other's behaviors your expected behaviors from a gameplay standpoint are. So you may not need to do a session 0 where you go, okay, guys, we need to work out the social contract. Animals are crashing stuff right now. So you may not need to do a session where you go, okay, let's work out our social contract and talk about it, but it is worth revisiting sometimes. And so one of the things can be inside the social contract is talking about what kind of player behaviors and things like that are expected from everyone at the table. In more ways, it's kind of different than the framework. Let's actually start with the framework. The framework basically outlines the rules and supplements that you'll be using, the story that you guys are setting up and telling, the setting, and the role of the characters. That itself is actually just a framework of the campaign. Juice kind of wrap that into the social contract, but I see it as something separate, which would be the foundation of the campaign itself. Now, where the social contract comes in is kind of like what I was saying, is it kind of dictates the behavior of the people at the table. It basically handles, okay, if there's going to be a rules argument, how are we going to handle that at the game? And the way to handle that, maybe the GM's going to make a call if we're not sure about a certain rule, and then we'll look it up after the game's over. That's how my table typically does it. Or we'll look it up when somebody isn't busy. So if I have the party split, and Brendan's doing one thing and I'm talking to him, but like the rest of my party is just kind of waiting for their turn, if they look up that rule and they throw it inside chat, they don't like interrupt me, I'm totally cool with that, and that's perfect. That's the way I like it to be done during my games, and that works for my players. Now, if I had a player who was, let's say, being a little bit too hack and slash for the kind of story that I had, that would go into the framework. Excuse me, the framework of the foundation, not necessarily the social contract, because that's more of a character in the storyline, not living up to his character role. But if I had a player who was consistently late, and we had to make a policy about having somebody who's late to games, or even just does no call, no shows to games, that would be part of our social contract. So another example from my table social contract is, if you don't show up for 3 games, your character is removed from the campaign, period. And if you want to come back, you're coming back with a new character, but it's going to be level 1 or whatever the equivalent is, depending on what system we're playing. And that's our way to try and mitigate that behavior. Now, I'm a perfectly reasonable person. If you let me know ahead of time, and when I say ahead of time, usually a day or so ahead of time, so that I have time to prepare and adjust my encounters. Because for me, the no call, no show is especially difficult, because then I have to adjust encounters on the fly. Whereas if you let me know just the day before, or even that morning, hey, work call, there's an emergency, I go, then that's fine by me. What bothers me is usually like an hour before the game, and then I'm like, that's an absence. And for me, it's 3 times in a row. So I'm actually pretty liberal about it. So like, if a player wanted to abuse it, they could technically not show up every other week and still be fine, according to the rules that I've got. I would have a conversation with that player and see if they want to play, or if every other week just works better for them, and then adjust the campaign so that everybody plays every other week. That way I get everybody at the same time. But if it continued to be a problem, and that every other week was just every other session, and now I've split it to 2 weeks and he's still not showing up, then it would become a problem, and we'd have to kind of revisit the social contract without necessarily having to state that we're revisiting the social contract. It would just be saying to the other guys, hey, so-and-so, let's say Jeremy, just to kind of throw names out. Let's say Jeremy hasn't been showing up to games, and I look at Tom and I look at Murdoch and Brendan and I go, hey guys, do you want him to continue to play? We've already switched the game to every other week and he's still not showing up. And the group as a whole makes that decision. Now that's an agreement, and that is part of your social contract, and you kind of set a precedence when you do so. So that part I do agree with Juice on, is that it is kind of the statutes, if you will, of what your gaming group is. Now, he mentioned about one-shots, how you outline, you know, we're going to play 5th edition, it's going to be characters of this level, and that. This is where I kind of beg to differ. I think that is part of the campaign framework, or in this case, a one-shot framework. And when a person says, hey, I want you guys to have good microphones, or have microphones, mute yourselves when you're not taking your turn, and have cameras. I think that's part of the social contract, because that's not really within the confines of the normal game. Because I know some people, they have like laptops without a direct microphone, which if you have that set up, I'd recommend a microphone. It works out a lot better for everybody, because then it's a weird acoustic thing, and you'll see it in some games online. But beyond my little issue with microphones and people not using them, but I think that falls under a little bit more of the social contract side. That one kind of dips in both, and this is why the topic's a little confusing, is because the social contract does touch upon things that are in the framework, and the framework touches upon things that are in the social contract. Like, part of the social contract is I expect from my players to create characters that fit with the setting, story, and fit within the purview of the game that we have designed or come to an agreement on. That's both part of the framework, established rules and things like that, and it's also part of my expectations as a social contract. Now, on the flip side of things, my players do have parts of the social contract that they expect of me, which is my players expect me to let them know, usually during our Thursday game, if we are going to in fact have Legend of the Five Rings or whatever game I happen to be planning for the weekend, because usually I DM the weekends. Let them know ahead of time that it's going to be a game or not. And I don't set my events up too particularly early, which I want to correct, so that you guys get those heads up on my channel about there being an event coming up. But usually, without fail, I'm every week, and they know that. They've kind of expected that with me. Unless there's some real life things that take players out for a little while, like we're taking the next 2 weeks off of L5R due to some real life vacation stuff. But I think that their expectations from me, as far as like what they are expecting from me as far as my behavior at the table, is also covered as part of that social contract. Like, they expect me to not come in, be a douche, and rain rocks on characters and be like, you all suck, you're terrible, you don't accomplish anything. And another expectation that I have as a player for a GM is that we can succeed at stuff. There's a lot of GMs that, for whatever reason, just don't let players succeed, and that bothers the hell out of me. Like, I leave games when that happens. If it just seems like it's a no succeed at all type of game. Now, if the game is designed like on Lloyd's channel, Jarl DM, he did a game where it was an Oriental adventure, and the players knew that the castle was going to fall. I'm okay if the ultimate thing is going to be a failure and the castle is going to fall, but if I get into combat and lose every single combat because of GM fiat, I can't make acrobatics checks because of GM fiat or something like that, I make a strength check to break down a door, and sorry about that. And let's say I make a strength check to try and break down a door, and you know it doesn't matter. I rolled like a 40, and the GM is like, no, nope, don't break it. It's just a wooden door. You don't break it. I'm not down for that. That's something that I don't agree with. And so, as part of my social contract to even myself, I try to not be that guy. So definitely the whole thing is that with the social contract is it's more of an expectation of behaviors and patterns that are at the table. Now, especially for a group of friends, you typically don't discuss a social contract because you all kind of understand each other's mannerisms. But I will talk about one more aspect that is unique to my game group, and I imagine that there's probably other game groups that have similar tastes and things. For myself, I have a little bit of PTSD, and I have another player who was in the military as well, and he has certain things that that he doesn't want to visit in a game because they're stressful to his personal life. So as an agreement, we don't typically bring those things up in game. Another thing that gets covered in a social contract that people don't really think about is how do you want to handle sex in your games. Some GMs, they'll go in, they'll describe it, they break out roll charts, and they'll tell you if the girl got pregnant or whatever else, if you got an STD and you're a paladin, you cure, whatever. I'm not that GM. For me, I do the fade out, and we all know we're all adults. It happened in the back scenes, but I'm not going to make you roll to see how well equipped you are. That's just not my style. And that's part of my part of what I bring to the social contracts is I tell them, you know, I'll DM, but these are my caveats. And one of them is I don't narrate sex scenes. It's just the way I am. And like in the case of certain stressful things, like if there's something that I think would cause me a little bit of PTSD, luckily as the GM, I don't have to introduce that. But I have a player who has some triggers, and if I know that I'm going to introduce something that could cause him problems, I can rewrite that in a way that it will still be an enjoyable game and not cause him stress or lack of sleep for the next couple days because I brought up something that caused a little bit of issue for him. And I think that's really where social contracts lie. And like I said, if you're part of a group of friends, you will probably never have the discussion about social contracts because you have been friends for a long time. You understand each other's play styles and things like that. And if you do a one-shot without a social contract, there are certain universal truths, if you will, about RPGs. And there's kind of a blanket idea of what a social contract is. Everybody kind of expects you to not be a chuckle fuck, which is our favorite term over at the W3. Essentially, don't go into a game and be an asshole and purposely tank the game. Everybody recognizes that. And that's a social contract point because that dictates your behavior. Everybody expects you not to cheat. That's a social contract thing. That's dictating behavior in the game. So that's kind of where those two break apart, framework and behavior. Now, I mentioned that I was going to talk about how you can use these things inside your campaign. If you want to do it, I did a revisit of our social contract after I read a book from Gnomestew, which, to be honest, a lot of what I'm saying is kind of the same stuff they say about framework and social contract in there. The book is called Odyssey, The Complete Game Master's Guide to Campaign Management, and it's by Gnomestew Publishing. Really excellent book. It's one of my favorites. I own all of the books that Gnomestew has put out so far, and I'm going to be getting the next one as well. But I think that their writing is really well done. It's very clean, easy to read language, and so for me, it's easy to absorb and kind of share that stuff. So what I did is I revisited our contract, and we kind of outlined some things and said, okay, I know what bothers me in games as far as behaviors and things like that go. This is what I want to add. And what I would suggest is your GM go first, to be honest. The reason for that is because your GM's going to outline stuff like basic behavior things that they expect at a game. And ultimately, you want your GM to be comfortable or else they're going to stop running. So my suggestion to everybody who's considering doing a social contract is have the GM go first. If you have multiple GMs, I would suggest going with one of the GMs and then going to the next GM, then going to players. And it doesn't have to be like a talk stick situation where only the person with the talk stick gets to talk. It can be an open conversation. If the GM goes, hey, I really don't like you guys not showing up and telling me you're not, and not telling me you're not going to be there. I want to do a 3 absence rule. If another player goes, you know what, I like the idea, but I think it should be a little bit harsher because, you know, there's always one person that's like that. It's a one time you're forgiven, the second time you're warned, and then the third time you're done. And it's not in a row. It's just period for the life of the campaign. And then you guys can have a discussion and see what fits for your group. Because if your group agrees and decides to go with a little bit harsher, you know, schedule in this kind of example, then that's what your group has agreed to, and that works out. And that's just kind of an example for campaigns. For one-shots, where the social contract comes in is, like I said, when you make your advertisement for your game, you list out the framework saying you want to play, for example, 5th edition. We're going to be 3rd level. You guys could be all classes except for casters because you have this great idea for this weird niche campaign where everybody's basically a fighter. And then below that, you have a list of other things, like you want cameras, microphones, you want people to understand that it's going to be broadcasted, and because it's going to be broadcasted, you expect them to not be chuckle fucks or tank the game on purpose. That all is underneath that purview of social contract. I think both are really useful, and both get used even if you don't necessarily recognize or call out that you're using it. But there is value in revisiting them, because you may discover that, you know, something that you used to view as a problem has kind of resolved itself, and you guys don't necessarily need that rule anymore, but you do need a rule for a new problem. And that's kind of how I do that. And I do that as part of the session 0, where I kind of talk about what the campaign's going to be. So the framework and the social contract are part of session 0. And usually session 0, the way I like to do it is I pitch a couple hooks. I let my players decide which one they're interested in, and then they make their characters kind of flesh out the world a little bit as far as what they're interested in. I give my players usually a good amount of freedom to decide some values of the world. So if I have somebody who wants to be an elf that comes from a society that's been heavily influenced by some dwarven mines that they found nearby, and they're very dwarf-like in qualities, then hell, there's an elven tribe out there that lives in the mountain and basically behaves like dwarves. I'm fine with it, and I continue. Unless it just seems completely unbelievable, I can wrap pretty much anything that the characters come up with into the campaign. There was actually a video by Chalice and Chains that came out earlier today that he was talking about how he does his session 0 in D&D. I thought it was a very good video. Check that one out. I'm going to include a link to that one and Juice's original video inside here. Cards, again, whatever corner they go, because I'm really liking those. I think they're a great way to go. So check out those 2 channels. I mentioned it previously, and I'm going to mention it again. Brigade Con is coming up later this year, and if you hadn't had a chance, go over to brigadecon.org and go ahead and sign up. So for Brigade Con, like I keep mentioning, it is for charity. So if you are not able to actually join, participate, and play games, you know, even if you guys stop in and say, hey, you know, I couldn't make it to Brigade Con, but I'm glad to see the games are up, and I'll check something out when I'm done. That would be totally cool. It's one of those things that, like, any bit of support really helps out. And if you want to help out financially for Child's Play, then we're going to have the T-shirts, and I should say they're going to have the T-shirts and the way to donate as well. And if you're thinking about running a game, make sure you register to run the game pretty soon here. They've got that registry open up on BrigadeCon as well, or brigadecon.org as well. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching. As always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And I will see you guys at the gaming table.